Here's some cute dogs. Hope you guys enjoy that. They're adorable.
Hello fellow adventurers, Thor here, and today we are tackling two different 14ers, Mount Harvard and then there is going to be Mount Columbia as well, and they're aptly named after the Ivy League schools, which fits into the topic of today's video as we're going to be going all over the art and the study of route finding, which in my opinion is probably the most important skill that you could learn for doing these backcountry and a lot of other hikes out there. Endurance is great, speed is great, but if you can't find out where you're going, you're kind of out of luck. Now, this trail is going to be about 15 miles and 5,000 feet of elevation. It's not an easy one by any means. Along with that, this is one of the hardest route finding trails in Colorado and one of the most dangerous because when you're going from Mount Harvard to Columbia, well, unfortunately, the trail isn't really marked well, and so you kind of got to figure out your own way while going over some loose rocks. We're going to do Harvard first, then make our way over to Columbia, and along the way, I'm going to go over some important tips and tricks that you guys are going to want to know when you're out on these trails to find your way if you get a little bit lost. All right, so we made it to the fork in the road, and this is where our first tip is going to come in hand, and that's all about reading signs. And I know you're probably thinking right now, God, this guy's an idiot. I learned how to read signs back in first grade. This video is pointless. Well, there's a little bit more nuance to it. As I explained in the beginning of this video, there are two mountains we're going to hit today. One is Mount Harvard, one is Mount Columbia. Columbia is to the left of me, Harvard is straight ahead. Now, I always recommend using a GPS map when hiking out in the backcountry or in the woods. You have a plethora of different options. You can use everything from Gaia to All Trails to, well, a topographical map if you so desire. I personally prefer All Trails, and when I looked at this trail, I saw that Columbia was actually a lot closer than the Mount Harvard trail. And I was thinking to myself, well, I'll just get the Mount Columbia knocked out really early, finish with Harvard, and be downhill for the rest of the day. That seems smart. However, it is very important to do research into what route you're going to do. Because when I saw user feedback, I noticed that everyone was saying you need to do Harvard first. And there's a very specific reason for that. There is no trail between Harvard and Columbia. It's all, like I said, loose rock and gravel. And Harvard sits at about 14,400 something feet, while Columbia only sits at 14,000 something feet, meaning that if you were to do Columbia first and then do Harvard right after, you'd be going through about 300 extra feet uphill of rock and unknown trail, which leads to a lot more injury risk and also just a longer day and more sweat. So this is clearly not only about just reading the signs, but it's a very important tip that to not get lost, you go ahead and do plenty of route finding now. So we are currently making our way up Harvard, and I made a mistake. I actually went up this route that you guys can currently see. However, the route right here is the one I was supposed to go up the mountain. The one right here is where I started from. So that is why it is so important, even when there aren't signs, that you bring a GPS one. I just checked the GPS. I'm only like 2 minutes off the trail. I check it pretty frequently, but very important to always carry it because it's so easy to just not pay attention for 2 seconds and then go off on the wrong trail. To give you a further example, the route right there is where I came from. Now, when I was going up, I actually thought that I was just going to go straight right there. That seemed like the most logical to my brain. I completely missed this up here, and that is the correct trail. So just further clarification, always bring GPS. All right, guys, so we're making pretty good time, having a good time on the mountain, and it brought me to my next thing to talk about, which is actually rock Carns. As you can see, it's this rock formation right behind me. Now, it is actually helpful for a lot of people in terms... He's just going to pant the whole time. There's nothing I can do about it. Now, it is helpful for a lot of people as they are markers placed on the trail to help you guys figure out where you're at. Are you going the right way? And it's a sign put there to say, yeah, you're doing the right thing. There is a pitfall with it that is very important to know about. They are man-made. They are hiker-made as well, meaning there can be human error in it. There has been cases where someone accidentally put one up and then someone ends up going into a boulder field because the hiker didn't actually take it apart, and that was somewhat of an issue. So, are Carns a good idea? Yes, you should definitely keep an eye out for them, especially in boulder fields to help you navigate. But outside of just boulder fields, you're going to want to be aware that could actually lead you somewhere you're not trying to go, or that there could be mistakes. Once again, GPS is always number one. If your phone dies, this is probably your next best bet other than having a topographical map, but just something that I wanted to go over and address. All right, so we made it all the way to Mount Harvard, which I believe is the third highest mountain actually in Colorado. It was a very, very high elevation. There's actually only a 1,000 elevation left on this hike, so it's actually making Columbia very easy. Another reason why I wanted to do Harvard first. I got the hard part knocked out. Now it should be a little bit easier. Columbia is this beastie right over here, and we're gonna have to hit this ridge line that you guys can kind of see right there. And we'll do our best to navigate and go over anything that we see while we're doing it. But let's go ahead and start getting our way over to Columbia.
So just to give a better example, we're descending Harvard right now. This is the ridge line that I was talking about that goes up to Columbia.
Very little elevation. I kind of wonder how people get lost because it seems pretty straightforward. So we'll see if there's any confusing things. That being said,
Here's some cute dogs. Hope you guys enjoy that.
they're adorable. So one common pitfall is as we make our way to Mount Columbia right there, we see the trail right there that we want to get to. So the obvious thing that most people are going to think is, I'll hit right there, I'll go down, it'll be nice and easy. That's not what you want to do. If you look to the left, well, it doesn't look like a very clear and well-defined trail. You're actually going to go down and around to hit that trail. If you try to go down here, it might work, but there's also the chance that you're going to hit a cliff edge and then you fall 300 feet and then you break your legs or you're dead. Then SAR has to come out, then you got a $20,000 bill, or even worse, you're dead. So yeah, don't try to take shortcuts. Look around, make sure you studied the route online or have GPS and you know when to go around obstacles. So on the way down, we found this cute little marmot. Also, always keep your dogs leashed when you are hiking. You might notice that mine are not. That is because I have trained them so that even though they see this marmot, they will not go for it unless I command them to, which I'm not going to do because it's a rodent. No, I'm actually dead serious. These are very good hiking dogs. They know to go single file right behind me and just follow me down the mountain. Do not let your dogs off leash unless you have thoroughly trained them. Even then, you're probably going to get yelled at by someone, but I'm not the moral police, so I'm not going to say, ah. So the views are incredibly pretty, but as you can see, we are completely in a rock field and the path is not that great. Going back to what we said earlier, you don't always want to trust Carns. However, in this situation, I spotted one right there, and that actually happens to be the trail. So sometimes you can trust these little guys. I also cross-referenced it with my all trails. I'm just pointing out the fact that sometimes they can work for your benefit. So for a trail like this, you will definitely want to use all trails. This is all giant cliffing there's a ton of Carns that actually go right here. Highly unsafe. You fall, you'll slip. It isn't much better getting to the top. We got to go through this rock field here and you go up through there and there's Columbia right there. So overall, this route finding is very hard. So make sure you guys are taking notes on all the tips and tricks that we went over. Plus, make sure you have good doggos too. If you're going to bring them out here, they need to be good at climbing. Going through all of that with no trail whatsoever, I'm going to be honest. I take back everything I ever said about rock Carns. They're actually pretty useful, but again, consulted with all trails. So make sure you still got your GPS. We're almost to the top of Mount Columbia. This was a minefield. We came down from up there, so we had to go down the ridge and around and then up through this. And whew. All right, everyone, we did it. We made it to the top of Mount Columbia. The view, absolutely great. Nice little lake over there. If you look right there, that is Mount Harvard, which we did, and then we had to cross that entire ridgeline on the backside, which was, I'm going to be honest, way harder than I thought it was going to be. I looked at the ridge, I was like, this seems pretty doable. I got lost a couple times. I had to be very, very attentive and aware. So keep in mind, no matter what your skill level is, if it's a route you've never done, do always keep your head on a swivel. And this was an incredibly physically taxing hike, way more than I expected. I did Capitol Peak last week, which is infamous as one of the most deadly hikes in Colorado. And physically, this was a lot more demanding. I'm just going to be perfectly honest. I will say Capitol Peak is a more psychologically, impairing. But we're going to go ahead and climb down this now and call it a day. All right, everyone, that was our adventure today. I am looking a little sunburned. The dogs did great. They're enjoying a big bag of treats I put in the back of the car. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the adventure and the traverse from Mount Harvard all the way to Mount Columbia. And until next time, everyone, thanks for stopping by. Keep hitting the trails, and hopefully I'll see you out there.